There's more coming out behind the scenes that shows that the latest bill that they are trying to pass, the Inflation Reduction Act, is actually nothing but a tax increase and will lead to more inflation. Here's a report from Fox Business. Most Americans will feel tax pain from dim inflation bill despite Biden's past promises. The vast majority of Americans will pay more in taxes as a result of Democrats' inflation bill, despite President Biden's pledge not to raise taxes on those making under $400,000 per year. The Inflation Reduction Act, unveiled Wednesday by Senator Joe Manchin and endorsed by Biden, would increase tax revenue by $16.7 billion from Americans earning less than $200,000 a year. This is according to a nonpartisan analysis from the Joint Committee on Taxation. Nearly every tax bracket would pay more in taxes, with those making below $10,000 per year seeing the largest uptick. However, Biden has repeatedly pledged that Americans earning less than $400,000 per year would not experience any tax increases during his presidency. The bill will not raise taxes on anyone making less than $400,000 a year. In 2023, the year in which the legislation would increase tax revenue most, individuals making less than $10,000 per year would pay 3.1% more in taxes, and those making between $20,000 and $30,000 per year would see a 1.1% tax increase. Tax revenue collected from those making $100,000 per year or less would increase by $5.8 billion in 2023. So they're touting this as it will give you benefits with health care and things like that, but you're going to, of course, pay for that with taxes. So if you don't get those benefits, you're paying for them in taxes either way. Taxpayers with an annual income of $200,000 or greater pay more than 57% of all federal income taxes. The Inflation Reduction Act, though, boosts Internal Revenue Service enforcement, a provision that is expected to increase federal tax revenue by $124 billion. The bill also creates a minimum corporate tax rate of 15%, which is expected to boost federal tax revenue by $313 billion. The proposed corporate alternative minimum tax is the largest revenue-raising provision in the analysis. It is not immediately clear how much each provision of the bill would lead to higher taxes. The JCT listed more than 20 of the legislature's provisions that it factored into its analysis. So we're basically talking about you raise taxes on some businesses too that are taking advantage of tax loopholes legally, and they're going to raise taxes and they're going to lay people off. So this will have a nice effect on the job market as well. Democrats are clearly trying to pivot this as only a tax hike on the wealthy, said the Federal Affairs Manager for Americans for Tax Reform. It's going to cost jobs, going to lower workers' wages. There's a $25 billion crude oil tax in this bill, he added. That's something that's going to hit everyone. That's a regressive tax increase on poor people that raises their energy costs, raises the price of gasoline. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg previously said that the gasoline tax increase would violate Biden's pledge not to raise taxes on middle-class Americans. So, could always buy an EV. Look, here's an ad for an EV. The affordable. It's probably only $50,000 instead of $60,000. And here's the other problem that's going on with the economy. I can't even afford groceries. Half of U.S. food banks report growing numbers of households needing handouts. Biden's plan to end hunger by 2030 comes unstuck as prices of eggs, butter, and other basics soar. 45% of food banks see increased demand, typically with 10% more people in need. High prices are derailing Biden's bid to end hunger. An inflation rate of 9.1% has put basics from butter to beef steaks out of reach for many. More than 38 million people in the U.S. do not get enough food to live an active, healthy life, the Department of Agriculture says. Nearly half of American food banks describe rising numbers of people lining up for handouts as inflation puts pantry basics out of reach, and Biden's administration's 8-year anti-hunger plan comes unstuck. Pat Young, 64, retired home care nurse, turned this month to St. John's Bread and Life program in Brooklyn, New York, as inflation pushed pantry basics beyond her annual disability benefit income budget of less than $30,000 per year. Living in New York on $30,000 a year. And you can see there's, it's the effect is different from different parts of the world and different parts of the U.S. And you can quote averages all you want, but there's different parts of the country that are more expensive to live in, and therefore when there's an increase, your budget becomes a little tighter. And then you have poor parts of the country that are in the same boat because a little increase is a lot of their budget because they're living paycheck to paycheck. As inflation bites, 21% of Americans have turned to food banks, according to a Tip Insight poll this month. About half of respondents were switching to cheaper store brands and giving up costly items like meat. And the other thing that I want to point out is that sometimes when prices rise, you want to switch to other alternatives, cheaper alternatives, but a lot of times you have to pay for a higher priced alternative because the option is only available at that higher price. So, it sells out the cheapest cost of eggs, and then you have to buy a bigger name brand, and you have to pay a lot more. According to the Department of Agriculture, more than 38 million people, including 12 million children in the U.S., do not get enough food to live an active, healthy life, a figure from 2020 that may expect to rise on the next update. Surging food prices come after state governments ended COVID-19 disaster rules that boosted benefits to some 40 million food stamp beneficiaries, and after a Trump-era food purchase and distribution scheme wrapped up in 2021. Yep, you give people a little bit more, they get used to it, and then when it drops off, then they don't have it anymore, and they're worse off for it. A White House statement this month spoke of a whole government strategy to end hunger and tackle illness and plans for a conference on hunger and nutrition hosted by Biden to chart a 50-year roadmap to tackle the problem. And prices are up. Food is more scarce. And inflation is rising. And that brings us to the next thing. There's still a baby formula shortage. The baby formula shortage will last into the fall, experts predict, as brands say they're at 30% out of stock, and Biden administration struggles to explain how they will prevent another crisis for mothers. Why has there not been something done to increase production? I can't imagine why we're not using government resources to help with some of the shipping. And if there's a bunch of problems with the ports, why are we not extending some of the National Guard to help with alleviating that? The military has trucks, they have airplanes, they could negotiate boats and stuff like that, and even help with, searching goods at the port if that's what's necessary. I don't know why there's not some kind of emergency order to catch up with this backlog of shipping and transportation. And, this is an opportunity where Biden could have stepped up and seen to it that a lot of these crises that are based on supply chain, he could have easily put some manpower and some money towards that to increase the productions of each of those kind of facilities, to increase the distribution of all these facilities, and cut back up on that. Instead, we let this opportunity go, and everything's still backlogged, and there's still shortages, and gas prices are higher, so there's less people shipping, and higher and higher prices for gas eventually means higher and higher prices for goods. Baby formula shortage will last well into the fall, supply chain experts predict. Crisis has gotten worse, with all formula brands reporting a 30% out-of-stock rate. President Joe Biden's administration is struggling to say how it will prevent another one from taking place. Lawmakers demanding answers. Do you have a plan to do that? Democrat Senator Patty Murray asked FDA Commissioner Robert Califf in a recent hearing. Califf has promised to review what he calls systematic issues at FDA. Republican Representative Mike Turner has introduced a bill that would end the federal requirement that each state contract with one manufacturer for its WIC program. Great. Government interference makes it even more difficult. The Biden administration could do this by regulation. They are not progressing to do so, so Congress needs to lead in this. The baby formula shortage will last well into the fall, supply chain experts predict, as the crisis has gotten worse and President Joe Biden's administration is struggling to say how it will prevent another one from taking place. Blah, blah, blah. A few more months, experts tell the shortage will go into the fall. When you can't feed your babies and you're worried about food prices and you can't even find certain goods, That's where it becomes critical. This is where it becomes a problem. So, and again, this points to regulations and stuff, and releasing restrictions on regulations, at least temporarily, would help these places catch up. I mean, you're talking about all these hoops and things that have to be jumped through for the WIC food stamp programs that make this stuff take longer, and it causes further backlog, causes transferring it from one state to another. It causes problems with a WIC program getting their formula from another provider because they can't get all they need from the single company that they have to be attached to. So anyway, like and subscribe. I'd like to say I'm going to put a little blurb about some of my shirts. I'm wearing one right now at the end of this video. Please check out the store and come back and visit us again. Thank you for stopping by.